Welcome to OneScreen TL6 training for Baltimore County Public Schools. Today we're going to run through the functionality of the board, turning it on, functioning through your home screen, and using your own device. Let's get started. So the first thing I want to mention is that there is a toggle switch on the back. So it is where the power cord connects, and you're going to want to turn that on in the event that your board is not on. So it should be plugged in. You want to initiate the power, and you're going to get this red button at the bottom. When you're ready to turn the board on, you'll hit that button and it'll turn blue, and then the screen is going to basically boot up. You'll hear a little music, and we're booting up here. Once that's on, we're going to cover in a second some of the functionality of the home screen and how you can activate the different applications and also use your laptop on the screen as well. In the meantime, it's a 65-inch screen that has a couple of inputs. Your device should already be connected through your port replicator, so we're not going to cover that. But you do have some additional inputs on the front that you'll be able to utilize for additional devices, document cameras, student devices that you might want to connect. So you have 3 USB ports here, as well as an HDMI and a USB touch port, which will allow you to use touch capability when you connect an external device that is not connected through your port replicator. And then you have a USB-C connection as well. So those are the inputs that you're going to utilize when you're connecting additional devices. The rest of the screen is functional from the screen itself. You have a stylus. You actually have 2. They're a dummy stylus, so there's nothing active about them. You don't need to calibrate. You don't need to use them in any particular way. And there is 2 spots that will allow that to stick onto the board. And then you also have a extendable wand that will come with it in the event that someone is a little bit shorter or that you just want to be off to the side as you're using your board. It's just a felt tip on the end, so again, nothing special about that. And then you also have a remote control, which for the most part, you will not need to use, but it is good to have it in the event that you either prefer to use it or something comes up where you need to. Okay, so now that the board is powered up, we're going to go ahead and start covering the functionality of the home screen and the features that are available to you. So this is your home screen, and what you see here are basically setting and file access widgets on this side. On this side, you're going to have actual applications that you're going to want to get into. And then in the middle, you see a preview window. So when you connect your external device, your laptop, to your port replicator, this is where the preview of that device is going to show up. At that point, when you're ready to use your device, you would actually just touch the preview window and it goes full screen, and then you are actually operating your device once it's connected. And of course, you would see your device in that window. Okay, so let's start on the left-hand side. You're going to have your sources here. When you touch that option, you're going to get your different inputs. So in addition to these inputs, you have other inputs that your port replicator is connected to, and that's really what you're functioning out of. So your port replicator will be in one of these 2 HDMI ports. That's all you really need to worry about unless you connect something else into the front. And then when you go through there, when you switch the sources, you'll be able to go over to those additional sources. And again, you'll get your preview in the windows you see here with my laptop, and then touch that and it becomes full screen. You have a settings button here. For the most part, you do not need to use this button. However, there are some things you might want to do. You have your network, you have display, sound, power off, and power on. So you can set a scheduler for that. That's really about all that you'll need to do, as these boards are already configured in the way that you're going to need to use them. Files is the next one. Files is just your storage that's on the board. So you're storing information on the board versus on your laptop or in some cloud-based drive. And we're going to cover that in a second in terms of how you might use that. If you were to put in a thumb drive here in one of these ports, you would see that thumb drive show up here. If you had a cloud-based drive, that would show up as well. Come over here. And the last one is applications. So I want to cover this before we get into some specific applications. So there are applications that come preloaded on the board. Again, vast majority of them you're not going to use. However, you do have a Chrome browser that you can access right from the board. You do have a calculator, you have whiteboarding and annotation. You can get to your files. If you have an external camera connected, you can get to that. So some basic functioning, but for the most part, most of these applications you're not going to be using and we don't need to worry about. What I am going to cover is on this side, you have specific applications that I do think you will use as you go through with the board. Specifically would be you have a YouTube application here, so you can go straight to YouTube without having to access from another, from a browser or from another device. You do have the Chrome browser, and then you have the whiteboarding application. Before I get into that, I want to touch a couple of things here. You've seen me touch on this arrow here. There's one on both sides, and this helps you access basically a quick menu so that you can get to and from things. So for instance, if I go into Files or into Settings or whatever I go into, if I hit this, on the very top is a Home button, and that brings you to the home screen. So there are really two buttons, I think, for the most part you're going to use here. One is for annotation, and one is to get you back to the home screen, which is really sort of your hub, and you get to everything else from there. So you have both of those on that side. You don't have an arrow on the bottom, but we do have a swipe up. It's sort of a gentle swipe up touch, which will give you access to all of that, as well as some sound and brightness settings as well, which are not on the side menus. Pretty basic stuff, but functional in that moment when you're using it. I'm going to go over to the one screen right over here now, and this is your whiteboarding application. So this is where we're going to talk about the most stuff in terms of functionality. So you have a whiteboard. You have a number of features in here. The first thing you're going to see on the left is a little hand that's pointing with one finger, and if I touch it, it's a full hand. Basically what that means is one finger allows you one point of touch, and the hand allows you multiple points of touch. The board does have 20 points of touch, so multiple students can come up at one time. Teacher and student, co-teaching can all be up at the board, annotating and whiteboarding at the same time. If you don't want that, you go to the single touch, and when you move it around with your whole hand, it's actually going to move it around like an infinite canvas, and then one finger will do touch. As I said before, it's no different. Your stylus is just a dummy stylus, so it's going to behave just like your finger, with one caveat. When you touch the pen, you can see an S and a B at the top. This refers to the different sides of the stylus. So the S is in black, and when I use that tip point for the S for stylus, I get black pen. When I go to the B and I change colors using the back side, then I have a different color. I know that's hard to see on video, but it's purple. And if I switch over without even touching that setting with that side of the pen, I'm back to black. So there are two different colors that are set up that way. You don't have to use them. You can set them both to black or both to one color, and then it doesn't matter which side you're using. If you use your finger, it's always going to pick it up as the thicker side. So in case that's a little confusing, and there is no option to have a thinner finger. So if you want to clear your information out, you do have a little trash can on the side there, but it won't let you clear the first page without there being additional pages. If you only have one page, the option to clear it is to hit the eraser and to slide to clear. The other option, I'm going to come back in and do some writing on here again, is to either use an eraser, put that there, and it's just if you hit the eraser, which is on the top, you just basically erase with your finger or your pen, whatever you're using. You go back here and do the writing again. And then your other option is if you wanted to select a certain area, you can select it and it'll do an intuitive erase. So you have three different options. You either erase directly using your hand. You do have to go back in and select the appropriate eraser, otherwise you'll be on the last one that was used. So you have that option. You can select certain things to erase, or you can clear the whole page. If it's second, third, fourth page, you can actually just delete that page, but you can't delete the first page. The next button is basically more of an infinite canvas. So when you select here, you can move that around, but you can actually select this item now, and make it a movable, somewhat editable object. So you can move it around. If you grab the corner, you can make it smaller, make it bigger. There's a trash can here to delete it. You can actually, let's go back in and do some more writing, and then select that. You can turn it around. So some basic functionality, but it lets you kind of move around and create what it is you want to create. I'm going to skip one of the settings and go over to shapes. So some basic shapes, you can change the thickness of the outline of the shape as well as the color. And then you would choose the shape that you want to use and then come in here. And as long as your finger stays on the board, you're going to be able to manipulate around where you want it. And then when you let go, it's static. If you come in to move that around and select that, now you can move it around. So, and those shapes are not erasable in the same way. They would have to be deleted as an object versus erasing like writing. Just keep that in mind. But you have a number of different shapes and line items as well. Dashed lines, solid lines, arrow, things like that. The next two buttons are undo and redo. Pretty simple. You can keep going back and undo and redo as you want. And then, of course, again, you have that trash can. Let's go to a second page and do some writing, and you can go back and forth between your pages. And then if I'm in page 2, I can delete it. It's going to prompt me and make sure that I want to delete it, and then it's gone. Just to show you, if I try to delete, it says cannot delete first page. So there you have it. Settings over here, adding page, toggling between pages, and deleting. We've covered that. This little button just moves those settings over to the other side if you're more comfortable. So it's really just a preference of where you want them. And then there are some settings here I'm going to cover that would then move to the other side. Going back to the one that I skipped, this one is the ability to bring in a different background or a picture. So you can go from your directory or your pictures, nothing stored on this board, it's brand new, so you wouldn't see anything, but you would have a list of any images that you've stored that you want to bring in as a picture into your whiteboarding. So if you had an image that was related to a lesson plan or something in reference to the school, sporting event, you could bring all of those in and then continue to annotate over them. Moving on to here, we have this little setting on the side. This is to exit the application altogether. This one is just information about the application, sort of background information. This one will allow you to do your background. So you can change the color of your background by choosing these. If you want a specific color, you can move around on this color wheel and choose a specific color, or you can go back to the original. You can also put some grids in here. I know this is a little bit difficult to see, but you can put math grids, handwriting, music lines, graph paper, etc., and then back to your solid background as well. You can also bring in an image. These are some standard picture backgrounds that are like chalkboards that you can put in there, and then you can change the annotation pen to white and emulate sort of writing on a chalkboard just for some fun stuff. But you can also bring in a picture that can be your entire background. So if you didn't just want these grid lines and you wanted to have whatever picture you want become your background, you can do that as well. The last thing I'm going to cover on this side is saving or sharing the content from here. So you are able to share this as a file. It would save as a JPEG or a screenshot. And you have several options here. So you can go to your storage that's on the board. So it looks very similar to when we were trying to pull an image in, we're sending it out, but you get the same options. So if you wanted to do your whiteboard, again, there's no storage on here. This is your internal storage, which would be storing it on the board. If you put a thumb drive in, you're going to get that as another option as well. So that would be saving the content to a particular location. When you're saving here, you have a number of options, and one of them is to share this file using a QR code. So when you hit that button, which is your typical share button, you're going to have this QR code pop up, which can then be scanned by a device, typically a phone or sometimes a tablet, and then that image is going to be onto that device as a JPEG or a screenshot, which can then be shared out like any other file or image that you have on there. So that's an option as well as saving and emailing. The last option is to email it out, and this will come from a generic one-screen email. You're emailing it from the board essentially, so the recommendation is that you plug in your email address and email it to yourself, and then from there you can email out to whatever groups you have, be they student groups, parent groups, or teacher groups. And then you will have that content and you'll be able to edit the content before you, well, you won't be able to edit it from your phone, but you'll be able to make sure that you have the content that you want, that it's the right file, and that it's going to the right people. The other aspect of it is you don't want to plug in your email coming from the board, because then your email is in there. So across the board, the policy is to leave it the way it is and send information to yourself, and then send it out there from your email address from your device. And then the last one is just strictly saving on the board itself. Let me move the keyboard out of the way, little floating keyboard. And so you can save this as a whiteboard file on the board, again, in whatever path you want and whatever name that you want to do. It's going to default to the name, giving it a date name. But you can change that there and then confirm that you're saving. If you do want to exit out, again, on the top is exit. Do you want to save before exiting? You can say yes or no, and it's going to prompt those same saving options from there. The last feature I want to cover on this, I'm going to go back into that application. There is a little toggle switch here. We call it a digital toggle switch. This is going to flip it over and now put you in annotation mode. So that would be considered whiteboard mode. This is annotation mode. Basically what it allows you to do, let's make sure it's in red, is, we'll make it a little bit thicker. You can come in and you can annotate on top of your content that you have. Now this can be done over anything. It can be a video, it can be a website, it can be documentation that you're trying to edit. It can be a curriculum page from either digital or a snapshot from your resources. It can be a website, part of your lesson plan, a sheet to fill in, doesn't really matter. You're going to have basically like a transparency over top that editing can be done where the content behind it remains intact, and then you're going to have this annotation over top that you can then save as well. So similar features in terms of changing the pen. You don't get that back and forth pen, and you don't get the color wheel and other options, because this is a much more pared down version of annotating. Erasing is just strictly erasing with your hand. No fancy fun features. You can sweep and clear all and say yes, and then you can save as well. Your two options for saving are on the board or sharing with a QR code. So no emailing out and no sending to a thumb drive, or you may be able to access a thumb drive here going into your storage, but there is no cloud-based drive and there is no emailing from the board when you're in the annotation mode. Going back to this for 1 second, when we're annotating in here, as long as you stay up and save your content before you exit out, you are able to maintain that content. Once you exit out, then that annotation is gone. So when I go back into this whiteboarding and I do annotation here, my pen back up. Oh, because I'm in, not in multi-mode, so there you go. So if you bring this up, and I minimize this down by going back to my home screen, and then I go back into it, that content is still there. And that will save until you either save it and exit out of the file, or exit out of the application rather, and don't save. As long as you just minimize it, this is going to stay there page after page. When you toggle over and you bring up that annotation, which is your quick, easy way to do it, if I toggle back, which I can do, and my whiteboard information is there, once you toggle out of that, that annotation on the annotate side is gone. So just keep that in mind. If it's information that you want to be able to save it before you minimize, exit out, or toggle back over. The one thing I do want to talk about is how to access that without having to go into the whiteboard application in order to toggle over. So you want to be able to access this when you have something up. So for instance, if you have your desktop up from your laptop and your device, as I do, you don't want to get out of this and go into the whiteboard to toggle over to annotation. So this is where this side menu or swipe up comes in. There's a little, it looks like a little piece of paper with a pen. You want to access that, and that brings up your annotation without having to go through all those additional steps. So now you're annotating over top of whatever content you have up. Again, you still have the option to toggle and go into the whiteboard, but you'll lose your annotation. And you do have the option to save. So full functionality, just two different ways to access it depending on what you're doing. Okay, and then we're going to go back to our home screen. As you saw, I touched the center preview window to access my laptop. You have full touch capability once you do that. So these are your applications. You won't use all of them, but the ones that you will use, we've covered. These are your files and your settings for your functionality built into the board. And this is your preview window for whatever source is connected that you want to operate. Whatever window is up there, whatever preview, you touch it and it becomes full screen. And you now have full touch capability to open up files and applications from the board itself just by using the board. Again, if you cable in here, you'll need to connect the right cables, but you will be connected properly through your port replicator and won't need to worry about those kinds of connections. Finally, a couple of things that I want to cover is you have a little floating window. You're able to remove this. This is just a quick menu, but we've already covered how to get to all of these things. It's really just a matter of preference. It can be moved off to the side. Again, you can go into the settings for that and remove it all together. It's just a matter of preference. And the last one is this is our support icon. You will not be using this. This is a completely different setup. For the time being, everything that you come across, whether it's training, whether it's functionality, something's not working, or you have a question about any kind of connections, you will go through your help desk. And the main reason for that is we want to be able to get as much information as we can about how the boards are being used, what's working, what's not working, and the help desk is going to be your quickest option for reaching support and getting troubleshooting on the issue that you have. If they need to reach out to us, they'll do that, but your help desk is going to be your number one source of support in terms of getting your questions answered and getting help with anything. When you turn the board off, it is an Android operating system. It's not turning off your device, even when you're connected through your port replicator. So you can just hold the button, and it's going to give you some options. You can just do screen off, and it basically puts the screen to sleep, but you see it's a blue light, so the screen is still on. And if you hit that, the screen's going to come back up. If you hold it longer and you do shutdown, then it's actually going to put the screen to sleep and this light's going to go red. At that point, you can toggle off if you want to cut the power completely from the back, just like we did at the beginning, turning it on, or you can leave it in this mode. When you're cleaning the screen, you want to use a cleaner that does not have bleach in it. So non-bleach cleaners, and ideally you do not spray directly on the board because you can ruin the touch capability by having liquid pool on the board. So spray onto a cloth and wipe the board, or use a pre-moistened, ideally Windex wipe or some glass cleaner, and then you can wipe the entire surface of the board. You just don't want liquid to pool. If you have any questions, again, please reach out to your help desk, and hopefully you'll enjoy using your board. Thank you.